And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. From very high above all the puerile and vacuous forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly and permanently ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday. It was a fantastic weekend, and sorry I missed you yesterday. I had a couple of things going on that I just couldn't get away from. But we're back at it this morning for another busy broadcast week. There is a lot going on right now. We just finished the Wyoming State GOP Central Committee meeting down in Douglas. Joey and I talked about that for quite a while on the morning show, well, and yesterday too. So there was a lot of news that came out about that. Probably one of the biggest stories that Trotsky really didn't touch on in the Cowboy all that much was what Kurt Meyer had to say. Now I know that he printed an article, or at least he published one, but he kind of missed the whole point, and that is that I'm pretty sure that speech was Treasurer Kurt Meyer's announcement, so to speak, about him running for governor. But of course, that wasn't mentioned in the piece on the cow pie. But that's kind of what I think is going on. Of course, it's debate night in America. There's a lot of stuff to break down there. I mean, how many chances at word salad will Kamala Harris have? And how many times will Donald Trump be able to prove her wrong? How many times will he be able to expose the record of the Biden administration, the Biden and Harris administration? And there's a couple of other things that are happening nationally. So anyway, welcome to the program. We've got a lot of stuff to cover today, but we begin with with the debate and what Chuck Todd had to say about what he thinks Trump's chances are. Now, of course, Chuck Todd is just another talking head on NBC News. He hates Donald Trump, as do most of the national media. And so on NBC News, Chuck Todd outlined on Monday what he believes is the most significant mistake former President Donald Trump could make in his upcoming debate against the vice president. Here is what he had to say.
What's the biggest pitfall for Donald Trump?
Well, I think it goes to something that Governor Kasich said at the very beginning of your segment here, hinting that he could really lose in this debate.
Okay, hold on a minute. So the person Chuck Todd is quoting is John Kasich, the guy who's run for president multiple times, who hasn't come anywhere close, and who is a raging liberal, even though he claims to be a Republican. That is the expert that Chuck Todd is going with. He's not talking about somebody who's actually been president or actually been in a presidential administration. No, he's quoting Chuck Todd or John Kasich of all people. Anyway, let's continue with this barf fest.
right? I don't know what a win for him looks like that he can orchestrate other than having his opponent, like what happened the last time. He didn't perform very well in the last debate, right? It's just that nobody noticed that he didn't really have some coherent answers of his.
Whoa, 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 whoa. He didn't perform well in the last debate. Donald Trump delivered a crushing blow to Joe Biden. Now, I'll admit that the bar was not set very high with Joe Biden. I mean, that guy was off in Never Never Land and didn't know what planet he was on. But that Trump didn't perform well, that's a ridiculous assertion. He absolutely did a really good job in that last debate. Admittedly, though, that the bar was not very high. Let's listen to a little bit more.
Really didn't notice some of the weird grievances he went down. I mean, my own son went on his TikTok feed and he goes, "Is Donald Trump talking and sleeping with a porn star during the first debate?" That is what broke through his feed. Okay, he's 17-year-old, so you can judge all you want there on that. But the point being is, Donald Trump really wasn't very good at this. And if he goes,
okay, so there's the next comment, and he uses as evidence to back up his claim that he talked about a porn star. I don't really remember that being a major fixture of the last debate, even if he may have mentioned it. But secondly, he's pointing to a TikTok feed on his 17-year-old's phone as evidence that Donald Trump didn't perform very well. Absolutely ridiculous.
after her in the ways he went after Hillary Clinton. And I'll tell you, Hillary Clinton, she was a very polarizing figure in 2016. And in some ways, the public, why they did, I don't know, sort of accepted his harsh attacks on her in a way that I don't think he uses those same techniques in common like this.
Okay, so what harsh tactics? Now, this is a common refrain for the mainstream media. They just make an assertion and they just think that you're going to accept it as fact. So, what harsh tactics? Give me an example. Point to what you're talking about. Now, if he's referring to Donald Trump walking around the stage, well, Hillary Clinton did that too. A debate is a performance, and sometimes you're walking around, sometimes you're sitting, or you're standing behind a podium, and sometimes you're sitting at a desk. But in any case, it's all performance art. And I don't know that there was any tactics. There were a lot of sharp refrains from Donald Trump, but it's a debate, and it's Hillary Clinton. Now, what Chuck Todd is insinuating here is that Donald Trump went after Hillary Clinton for being a woman. That is not at all true. There was not a single instance where that actually happened. Did he go after her for her ability to do the job? Absolutely. Did he go after her for her record? Absolutely. About the things that she did while she was Secretary of State? Absolutely. But whatever tactics Chuck Todd is referring to, I mean, it's absolutely meaningless. And he doesn't give an example to back up his claim anyway, so we should just completely disregard that. But here's a little bit more.
I think they're likely to boomerang badly in his direction. So that's what I think. His inability to not go on the attack in a personal way against her, his inability to sort of restrain himself on those things.
Okay, so now Trump has an inability to stop himself from personal attacks. He just can't do it, according to Chuck Todd. That's absolutely ridiculous. Watch the last debate, and there was lots of policy. Now, I don't necessarily agree with how it was delivered. I don't necessarily agree with the order in which Donald Trump chose to talk about those policies, but it was policies nonetheless. It was very little about personal attacks, even though there was admittedly some of those in his debate with Joe Biden. But it wasn't this barrage of personal attacks that Chuck Todd is leading you to believe. And the second thing that Todd is trying to do is to kind of set the stage to make you think Donald Trump is just going to attack her personally, and it's not going to have anything to do with policy. See, what the media is trying to do is two things. One, they're trying to downplay the performance of Donald Trump. They're trying to lead you to believe that he's going to do some things that may or may not happen. They don't have any clue any more than I do. And the second thing that the media is going to try to do, and I haven't really seen this quite yet. This morning I had a dentist appointment. I ran to the dentist appointment, got that taken care of. And on the way back on the radio, They were discussing how Kamala Harris is totally ready for this debate. He's really going to attack policy, and it's really going to be great. She's going to be fantastic. Yeah, Sirius XM radio. I don't know what you're going to do with it. And actually, the station it was on was Fox News headlines. So go figure there. So they've got the downplaying of Donald Trump, the trying to puff up Kamala Harris. And the next thing you'll probably see sometime this afternoon is trying to set low expectations for Kamala Harris so that when some of the word salad comes out, it's not going to be nearly as shocking. This is the typical attack of the mainstream media, and they pretty much do this with all debates, and so it's fairly predictable. But let's go ahead and finish up Chuck Todd.
Is what I think is his biggest risk here, which is where, look, I'm going to assume there is a second debate, but if there's none, it'll be because he couldn't help himself on the person.
Oh, yeah. See, just couldn't help himself on the personal attacks. Well, let's be honest. There is a lot of stuff to attack with Kamala Harris. There's her flip-flopping back and forth. Well, where, her values haven't changed at all, but I don't believe the things that I did before, fracking and the border and drugs and you name it. Kamala Harris, the chameleon, has switched and flip-flopped on just about every single policy that she advocated for, both in the Biden administration and in her failed run for president the last time. And excuse me. Should have had the cough button on there. Anyway, let me get a drink. Okay, that's much better. But what I was saying before I had the coughing fit, you gotta love live radio, is the first time she ran for president, I don't even know that you can consider that a run, simply because she was out of the race before a primary ever took place. And if you compare that to what's happening now, Kamala Harris didn't compete in a single primary. She was basically anointed by the Democrat Party, which is interesting in that these are the people that are constantly screaming about democracy, and they completely disregarded their own democratic process to select a nominee. Really, what I think you're going to see tonight is Kamala Harris try to avoid any sort of specific policy. She's going to lean on Donald Trump as a convicted felon and on January 6th and on his claims about the 2020 election. And that's pretty much all that she's got. There isn't any more in the tank about what she can talk about policy-wise. And the truth is, whatever she's saying now, American voters really aren't buying it anyway. There's a great piece out here on, I think it was on Fox News, but let's see here. Well, we'll get into it. ABC News. Anyway, the Trump-Harris race neck and neck nationally in new survey. Pollster sees a warning sign for the Democrats. Yeah, this is actually Fox News. And I quote, "The Big Money Show co-host Brian Brennard sat down with Todd Puro to discuss the role of the economy in the upcoming presidential debate. Former President Trump and Vice President Harris are neck and neck ahead of their first and potentially only debate in Philadelphia on Tuesday." That's today. According to a new survey of voters that has some pollsters seeing a warning sign for Democrats. Now, remember last week on the program, I told you how all these polls work, that you have a convention, and typically, there's a big bump in the polls for the candidate right after the convention because you've just been on TV. There was a lot of guest speakers on the stage. People are generally excited. And then that wanes a little bit because the candidate has to start talking about actual issues, things that they actually believe in, and trying to woo voters. And then you'll see that bump from the convention sort of wane a little bit in the case of Kamala Harris. And that's exactly what happened. After the convention, the media was all excited that Harris was going to win the election and her poll numbers were up. Well, they're not up anymore, and we're right in the middle of those poll numbers going down. And so this poll has Trump ahead by 1 point, which it's probably a lot more. Historically, and in the 2016 election, the polls were shockingly wrong when it came to Donald Trump, simply because a lot of voters didn't want to say publicly that they were going to vote for Donald Trump. And in the history of American politics, most of the time when there's an incumbent in office, and I'm not saying all the time, I'm saying most of the time, voters vote with their pocketbook. And so one of the reasons that the polling was wrong in 2016 is we were just coming off the Barack Obama presidency, and the economy really wasn't doing that great. We were moving closer and closer to socialism, which we're absolutely on the precipice of it now. But typically, I think that the polls are wrong. And in this case, I think Trump's lead is quite a bit more than 1%. Back to the article. Harris leads Trump 49%. Excuse me. So it's flip flop 49% to 48% among registered voters, showing a race that has tightened since August when Harris held a 3-point lead against Trump. That was right after their little convention. That was the bump I was telling you about. And that's another thing, too, that the bump was only 3% is significant. Typically, you see the polls go up quite a bit more after the convention. It works the same with the Democrats or the Republicans. Now, if you have a great candidate and they start performing well after the convention, well, then the poll numbers just continue to go up. In this case, not so much. Among those who say they definitely plan to vote, a survey found that Harris edging Trump by 3 points, 51% to 48%. Trump, however, leads Harris among independent voters 49 to 46, a 14-point shift from August when Harris commanded an 11-point lead. Okay, so it's just polling back and forth. But here's an interesting one for you. CNN. Listen to this. Now, typically, you're not going to hear CNN be favorable to Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form. But check this out. This is fascinating.
Latest snapshots comes from New York Times and Siena College polling. Let's look at the numbers. The bottom line in this race right now, there is no clear leader. Former President Donald Trump does hold a 1-point advantage over Vice President Kamala Harris, but it's well within the margin of error.
Okay, remember, this is CNN. And if there's any welcome news for Donald Trump, they are going to downplay it. So he's reporting on a poll that shows that Trump is ahead by 1 point, and he says this is welcome news. So what you can deduce from that is the lead for Donald Trump is probably a lot more than what they're actually reporting, because remember, it's CNN and they're doing what they do.
Nearly 3 points. The poll does confirm what others before it have suggested. There is a wide gender gap among likely voters. Women are breaking for Harris roughly by 11 points, while men favor Donald Trump by about 17 points. Looking more closely at race among white voters, Trump is up by 15 points, while Harris holds the advantage among Black and Hispanic voters, though Trump's numbers with these voters are actually higher historically than most Republican presidential candidates have been. So that is actually welcome news for the former president.
Okay, so if Trump's numbers are up among minorities, that's actually a really good sign for President Trump, simply because if there is a marked increase in Hispanic and African American voters, it might actually pretend a win for Donald Trump, because he doesn't actually have to win those two minority groups. He just has to have a sizable gain. And so right now, even CNN is reporting that his polling is gaining among those voters. So all this being said, it looks like Donald Trump is, I would say, decidedly in the lead, no matter what the mainstream Wyoming and national media say. Well, we've gone a little bit long here, so let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll continue with our discussion of the debate.
And then he must have been about 7 tours. It would be long. And I chair it would be long. They should have made
You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a selection of better news, entertainment, and commentary than right here on the Independence Network, with great voices like Joey Carenti from Just Blame Joey, Ken Pendergraft from The Ramble Room, Tom Kelly from Wide Right Turn, and the lovely Christine from The Hair Affair. And of course, my program, Cowboy State Politics, Wyoming's most listened to political program. Also, don't forget to check out the articles section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program.
I remember I was 8 years old with a tape waiting on the radio. Come on now, play Black and Black. I wanna press this on repeat. Remember Panama City, long nights with Christie. To the paradise city, then hypocrite. Guitar cracks and dust. It just beats the bass drum. Still thumb, I don't have show in the second row, which black on his shoulder. Still thumb, afraid to go. When the lights go down, the crowd cheers. I'm down the cold, I blow. Sweet to the all the time. Arguably in the big Coliseum. No dancing, no lip syncing. I tell you this, don't fight, feel it.
Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network, on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter, and a whole bunch of other places, probably. You know, that's the thing about podcasts. You really have no idea where it's being shared, or who has retweeted it, or who's forwarded the darn thing. It's really kind of up in the air. So really the only gauge you have is to watch the media and watch what's happening on social media and see if anything you talked about gets through. So thank you very much for listening to the program. I really appreciate it. Without you, I really wouldn't have any reason to do what I'm doing. So thank you very much. But anyway, let's get back to talking about the debate. Now, if you didn't know, I happen to have a little bit of experience in this area. In college, I won 2 national speech and debate championships. So I know a little bit about this. And one of the pitfalls that I think a lot of presidential debates, your local debates, they have is, first of all, they don't actually let you get into it with the other candidates. There's no back and forth, and that's what happens with debate or forums here in Wyoming. It frustrates me to no end that everybody wants to do a forum, because they don't like the back and forth. They don't like people attacking each other, because usually it's the conservative that ends up winning those exchanges. But that's generally not the case with presidential debates, unless, of course, there's 10 candidates on the stage. And it's really one of those dumb forums. But one of the interesting things about this, and I didn't know how I was going to feel about the rules that Joe Biden and Trump had agreed upon. One of the interesting ones was that they cut the mic off when your time is expired. And I thought, well, that might kind of decrease the amount of back and forth, and it might take away from it. But then I got to thinking, debates in the past, the ones that we really remember, are when candidates wait to respond. And there was probably no better debater candidate to do that than Ronald Reagan. So, take for example, let's see here. Which one do I want to start with? Let's go with this one. This is Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter. Check this out.
Governor Reagan, as a matter of fact, began his political career campaigning around this nation against Medicare. Now we have an opportunity to move toward national health insurance with an emphasis on the prevention of disease, an emphasis on outpatient care, not inpatient care, an emphasis on hospital cost containment to hold down the cost of hospital care for those who are ill, an emphasis on catastrophic.
Now, you notice Jimmy Carter's just going on and on and on about all this healthcare stuff and his wacko liberal agenda. And by the way, the more things change, the more they stay the same. There's nothing new under the sun, even in politics. Even back in Jimmy Carter's day, they were talking about Medicare for everybody and how the government needed to provide healthcare. So even back then, let's continue with the soundbite.
Health insurance, so that if a family is threatened with being wiped out economically because of a very high medical bill, then the insurance would help pay for it. These are the kind of elements of a national health insurance important to the American people. Governor Reagan, again, typically is against such a proposal.
Governor, there you go again. When I opposed Medicare, there was another piece of legislation meeting the same problem before the Congress. I happened to favor the other piece of legislation and thought that it would be better for the senior citizens and provide better.
Okay, so you notice what he did there. He let Jimmy Carter finish, and then he goes, there you go again, insinuating to the audience and those viewing on the television that maybe Jimmy Carter was lying about what Ronald Reagan's policies were. But he let him finish, and the response hit, and he was able to explain what his actual position is. There was another great exchange between the moderator and Ronald Reagan. This one is another really, really famous one. It's one of my favorite ones. But, usually in debates, you have to have a response that grabs the audience's attention, and then you have to have a chance to explain. And typically, you don't really have enough time to explain too much. So you can't get too much into the weeds. And so your response needs to be at kind of a high level. And what I'm talking about here is here's a great example for you. In Sheridan County, every primary election and general election, the Chamber of Commerce puts on forums. But your responses are limited to like 1 minute, 2 minutes. So one of the questions to now Representative-elect Tom Kelly was, can you talk about the budget? And I don't even remember what the actual question was, but it was, explain this part in the budget. And Tom's response was, I don't think a minute is enough time to explain that part of the budget, but here's what I think about it. So precisely the right answer. Now, in this next soundbite, it's the moderator asking Ronald Reagan about his age. Listen to this. This is a really famous one. You've probably heard it before, but I think it's hilarious.
You already are the oldest president in history, and some of your staff say you were tired after your most recent encounter with Mr. Mondale. I recall yet that President Kennedy had to go for days on end with very little sleep during the Cuba Missile Crisis. Is there any doubt in your mind that you would be able to function in such circumstances? Not at all. True, and I want you to know that also I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience.
Now you hear the response from the crowd. Everybody's laughing. And if you go back to YouTube and watch the video of it, even Walter Mondale is laughing at that response. Wonderfully funny, answered the charge from the media without, exactly as he should. And, it's one of those things where you put them back on the defensive. And when you're debating, when Republicans or conservatives are debating anybody, really, they've got two opponents. The person they're actually supposed to be debating, and then the media, the people who are moderating the darn thing. During the primary election, the Independence Network tried to get a debate set up with the Sheridan Press. We thought, hey, if you want a fair debate, we'll co-moderate it with you. That way you've got the left-leaning outlet and you've got us and our right-leaning outlet. And of course, they weren't interested in putting on anything like that because it's their modus operandi to put conservatives on the defensive, that they don't want to give, they don't want to have a fair debate, they don't want to have a fair exchange of ideas. Instead, they want to advantage the liberal candidate. So it's more likely that that candidate will win. We saw a lot of examples of that in the primary election here at home. There was a forum that was set up in Buffalo between Barry Crago and Mark Jennings, and the whole thing was entirely a setup. When the moderator, who was Kate Harness with 307 Net Radio, it's basically another local podcast over in Buffalo. Mainly she reports on, just local board meetings and doesn't really offer any commentary, just records them and plays them so you can listen to them. So anyway, when she asked questions, she only allowed one question, and it was to the sheriff, and she allowed him to absolutely untruthfully attack Representative Jennings. And then right after Jennings put the Sheriff Odenbaugh in his place, that was the end of the questions. The whole darn thing was an absolute setup. But that is typical of the liberal media, especially in Wyoming, but nationally too. So on ABC News tonight, they are the hosts of the debate. ABC News is one of the most liberal and anti-Trump outlets that's there. On the morning show, you heard Joey talk about David Muir, who that guy is a liberal left winger. Well, he's one of the moderators. They can't have this debate on Fox News or on Real American News or any outlet that would put on a fair debate, because that's not what they want. The media doesn't want a fair debate. They're more interested in the liberal candidate winning, which is why all of these things are set up on, CNN, MSNBC, ABC News, and why you don't see them on a fair and balanced network, or even one that is, mildly conservative like Fox News. So anyway, we're down to the bottom of the hour. Let's go ahead and take another break. And then I'm going to bring you some sad news about one of my favorite actors. So we'll do that after the break. It's spring in the Cowboy State, or as Albert Summers likes to say, spring-ish. Time to get the motorcycle out of the garage, time to go up the mountain, time to get outside and tromp around. And when you're doing that, you still want to make sure that you take care of your feet. The best way that you can do that is order a pair of Kenai boot socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. I know, your mama always told you that wool socks are only to be worn during the winter. But times have changed, my friends. The Kenai boot socks from the Buffalo Wool Company will not only keep your feet nice and toasty warm, they'll keep them cool and dry in the summer. Trust me, these are the most incredible socks that you're ever going to put on your feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. You're definitely not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
Let's go. I just stop forever dead though. Well, show you.
Watch out. Cowboy state politics is only going to get stronger. The Independence Network is only going to continue to expand. With Cowboy state politics, wide right turn, just blame Joey, the Ramble Room, and the Hair Affair with Christine. That's right, my friends. Independent media in Wyoming is growing, and the Independence Network is leading the charge. There was nobody else in the primary election that conducted as many interviews as we did. And the whole point is so that you could get to know each and every candidate. You could hear them in their own words in long form interviews. And I'm pretty sure that nobody else in the Wyoming media did that. So anyway, stick with the Independence Network. It's the most accurate. We are the most accurate source of news that you're going to find. And so anyway, it's ours, so it's fun. Also, if you're looking for a place to advertise your business, consider the Independence Network. We've got a statewide reach. We've got multiple platforms that you could advertise on. So hit me up. Just send me an email. The address is david@cowboystatepolitics.com if you're interested in advertising. So, my friends, I have some sad news. One of my favorite actors, James Earl Jones, has passed away. And he passed away yesterday at his home. He was 93 years old, and he's one of my favorite actors. And let's be honest, there are a couple of voices that are just iconic. There's, James Earl Jones. There's Morgan Freeman. Just voices that immediately, when they start talking, you know exactly who it is. And of course, my first introduction to James Earl Jones was on Star Wars. And so, of course, as a tribute to one of my favorite actors, let's do a little Star Wars montage here. Let's see here. Well, first, here's a great line. All the Star Wars movies had great lines from Darth Vader, which, of course, James Earl Jones was just the voice behind Darth Vader. He didn't actually do any of the acting. They just dubbed in his voice. But here we go. Here's the first one.
Until this battle station is fully operational, we are vulnerable. The Rebel Alliance is too well equipped. They're more dangerous than you realize.
Dangerous to your Starfleet, Commander, not to this battle station.
The Rebels will continue to support the Imperials.
The Imperial Senate will no longer be of any concern to us. I have just received word that the Emperor has dissolved the Council permanently. The last remnants of the old Republic have been swept away.
That's impossible. How will the Emperor maintain control without the bureaucracy?
The regional governors now have direct control over their territories. Fear will keep the local systems in line. Fear of this battle station.
And what of the rebellion? If the rebels have obtained a complete technical readout of the station, it is possible, however unlikely, they might find a weakness and exploit it.
Plans you refer to will soon be back in our hands.
Any attack made by the rebels against this station would be a useless gesture, no matter what technical data they've obtained. This station is now the ultimate power in the universe. I suggest we use it.
Don't be too proud of this technological tower you've constructed. The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant as to the power of things.
Don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader. Your sad devotion to that ancient religion has not helped you conjure up the stolen data tapes, or given you clairvoyance enough to find the rebels' hidden fortress.
A great scene, actually. I mean, if you're a Star Wars fanatic like I am, that scene is great. I mean, it's pretty much the first time. Well, I mean, it's not the first time you see Darth Vader, but it's the first time that he gets into the dialogue. Well, here's a little bit better of a montage, several different quotations from the movie. So just take a listen to this. Hope you enjoy it.
I'm not tear this ship apart until you found those plans and bring me the passengers. I want them alive.
Lord Vader, the fleet has moved out to light speed and we're preparing to...
You have failed me for the last time. No. Captain Piet, Yes, my lord. Make ready to land our troops beyond their energy field and deploy the fleet so that nothing gets off the system. You are in command now, Admiral yet.
Thank you, Lord Vader.
It is system. I'm here to put you back on schedule.
I assure you, Lord Vader, my men are working as fast as they can.
Perhaps I can find new ways to motivate them.
I tell you, this station will be operational as planned.
The Emperor does not share your optimistic appraisal of the situation.
But he asks the impossible. I need him.
Then perhaps you can tell him when he arrives.
The Emperor's coming here?
That is correct, Commander. And he is most displeased with your apparent lack of progress.
We shall double our efforts.
I hope so, Commander, for your sake. The Emperor is not as forgiving as I am. What is it, General?
My lord, the fleet has moved out of Lightspeed. Comscan has detected an energy field protecting an area of the 6th planet of the Hoth system. The field is strong enough to deflect any bombardment.
The rebels are alerted to our presence. Admiral Osborn came of Lightspeed too close to the system.
He felt surprise was wiser.
He is as clumsy as he is stupid.
A part of the rebel alliance, the traitor. Cowboy.
Fuzzy accepted. Leader. As we will discuss the location of your hidden rebel base.
And then, of course, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last. The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Only a master of evil, God. You can't win, Darth. If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, I just love Star Wars. And the voice of James Earl Jones, really hard to beat. Another famous movies that he was in, Coming to America. Every time I watch that one, I just laugh hysterically. So we're going to miss James Earl Jones. He had a fantastic career, and but you know, you can always go back and watch his movies. There's nothing in my mind. There are some iconic characters that you could just not get out of your head. Darth Vader is one of those. Of course, he also played in Field of Dreams, another one of my favorite movies. So, great actor. I'm going to miss him. So, farewell. Moving on. From the Blaze, Kamala Harris is pro-worker like McDonald's is pro-cow. This is a pretty funny article from the Blaze. And I quote, Kamala Harris has yet to release any official policy proposals on her campaign website, but she has been sharing her thoughts through speeches, social media posts, and surrogates. One of her latest positions is now, with more joy, claims that she is pro-worker and pro-small business. Quite the rebranding. Now, we started the program this morning talking about how Kamala Harris has flip-flopped on just about everything. Forget about what she said before. None of that matters now. She is a new candidate and new woman. Now, since this article was published, she actually has published a couple of things on her website, but they're not specific policy proposals like you would expect from a presidential candidate. Rather, they're more like just kind of big picture, big high ideas. That's slightly more specific than just saying, we're about joy. We're about change and hope and change and hoppity change. Quote, Harris broke more Senate ties than any vice president in history, directly influencing key legislation. She played a decisive role in bad administration policies, casting the deciding vote on measures like the American Rescue Plan, which stoked historic inflation that continues to burden workers and businesses. She also voted for the Inflation Reduction Act, or the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which drove up deficits and allowed government spending to overshadow private sector spending. The vice president's tie-breaking votes make her directly responsible for these outcomes. Your work should be your choice, not to mention that flexible work benefits the economy. But Harris doesn't think so. Harris's proposed policies do little to remove regulatory or tax barriers for small businesses and workers. In fact, many of her ideas would do exactly the opposite. Higher corporate tax, regardless of the intended income bracket, would negatively affect hiring, worker pay, and small business operations. While she has mentioned increasing a tax credit for small businesses, she has provided no clear specifics. Any potential credit would most likely offset any sort of increases in other corporate and income taxes. The Biden-Harris is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. If your name is Sleepy Joe Biden and you can't remember if you put socks on this morning or not, well, I can't really help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president of the United States. And now, back to the program.
Thanks.
The problem with most politicians is none of them have ever written a paycheck. None of them have any experience in private business. They don't really have any idea how taxes affect private businesses. And the best example of this is the minimum wage. You hear all sorts of leftist politicians saying that, well, we need to increase the minimum wage. That's going to be good for workers. The reality is, when you put more mandates on private business, they cut back on jobs, not the reverse. There have been a lot of instances, specifically in California over the last couple of months, where the government has arbitrarily increased the minimum wage to such ridiculous heights, such as $20 an hour for fast food. Well, that has, and here's the thing, like, businesses are going to continue to make money. They're not going to take all of those losses and not try to recoup them somehow. And so, and it works the same way with taxes. Businesses don't pay taxes. Consumers do. So when you raise taxes, and it doesn't really matter what your claim is, whether you're saying you're going to, recoup the deficit or lower government spending or whatever, you're going to increase revenue. Really, what that is ordinary, everyday consumers that are footing the bill for everything like that. And that encompasses everything. So the minimum wage increased taxes, any sort of contribution to Medicare or Social Security or anything like that, it has the unintended result of decreasing jobs. And the reason for that is if you own a private business and you have to pay more for your workers, you're just more likely to do it yourself, or you're going to put more burdens on the workers that you keep. It never increases the amount of actual jobs. And so when Kamala Harris says that we have a record 19 million small business applications, nobody really knows what that means, because typically, at least the way it works in the Cowboy state, if you want to apply for a sales tax license, it's kind of, well, really, it's no more difficult than filling out an online form and going to it. I mean, it's not all that complicated. You just submit the online form, and that's pretty much it. It's not very complicated at all. In fact, it takes like all of 10 minutes. The same is true for getting an EIN number, or, I mean, that's the employer identification number that comes through the IRS. And it's, again, that's another thing that's not complicated at all. It takes about 10 minutes. You fill out an online form and boom, you're off and running. So nobody really understands what this small business application number means. You don't have to apply to open a small business. You just start doing business. For example, if you want to open a lawn care business, nobody accepts an application for you to start a lawn care business. You just start doing it. And when you add employees, well, then you have to start paying taxes. But it's really no more complicated than that, my friends. So nobody really understands what the rhetoric coming out of the Harris-Biden administration actually is. We do know that this statistic has nothing to do with new business formation at those levels. You don't need to apply to become a small business, although small businesses with entities do register at the state level. Currently, over 33 million small businesses exist, and that number typically grows by fewer than 1 million per year in normal active years. Even in 2020, during the pandemic, a significant time for new small business formation. Around 1.07 million new businesses were started, according to the Small Business Administration. Harris's stance against worker freedom further harms both workers and small businesses. Supporting them means respecting an individual's right to choose how and when to work. More than 70 million gig workers operate in the United States. Just like me and this program, I would fit into what they call the gig economy, in that I work from my own studio. It's all of my own work. I don't have any employees, and I make money off of advertising. That's essentially what the whole thing is. Workers often pursue flexibility and independence, choosing to set their own hours and work terms instead of becoming traditional employees. And so the economy that we're in, pushed mainly by the Biden and Harris administration, forces individuals to start their own small businesses because of the taxes that are in place on small business. So instead of going out and asking for work, a lot of people just say, well, I'll start my own small business and I'll make my own money. That's exactly what I do. Now, with the Harris administration, though, because they don't understand small businesses and they've never written a paycheck and they've never had to hire or fire an employee, they don't understand any of this. When both parties agree to an arrangement that works for them and pay their taxes, that is, the employer and the employee, self-employed individuals pay double the self-employment tax, covering both the contribution and what an employer would pay. So when I file my taxes, I have to pay both of those because I'm employed by myself and I have to pay for all the workers' compensation and all of that. Let's see here. The government has no business interfering in any of this. Your work should be your choice, my friends, not the choice of the government. Not to mention that flexible work benefits the economy. But Harris doesn't think so, despite her claim of being pro-worker and small business. In 2021, the Biden-Harris administration reversed a pro-worker independent contractor rule established under President Trump. In 2024, the Biden-Harris Department of Labor introduced a stricter set of standards, reducing the ability to be or hire a contractor, though enforcement has remained limited thus far. Harris pushed this stance even farther. On September 2nd of 2024, she posted on X, formerly Twitter. I really wish that we could stop saying the whole formerly Twitter. We all get it. It's not named Twitter anymore. It's called X. Quote, when I am president, I will pass the PRO Act, the PRO Act, and end union busting once and for all. The PRO Act includes anti-contractor provisions similar to California's AB 5 rule, aiming to nationalize these restrictive measures and impose other anti-contractor, anti-free work, and anti-small business provisions into law. Kamala Harris's actions clearly oppose worker freedom and small business success. These large groups should let her know what they think of that in November. The whole point, my friends, is that when you increase regulations, it doesn't really matter what type of regulations they are. Generally speaking, it results in a decrease of jobs. And if you're the small business owner, or if you just work for yourself, it makes it less likely that you will start a small business simply because you have to pay more taxes, there's more regulation, there's more paperwork to do. So to make your life easier, you just go and work for somebody else. Easy peasy, chicken squeezy, my friends. But it doesn't end there with Kamala Harris. And I don't really have enough time to get through this article. We've only got about 4.5 minutes left in the program. But there's all sorts of other policies that Kamala Harris supports, or now she says that she doesn't support, that impact small businesses. One of those is her disastrous policy at the border. In 2019, she pledged support to cut immigration and custom enforcement funding and provide transgender surgery to detailed migrants. This is also from The Blaze, but the original claim was made on CNN Politics. And I quote, as Kamala Harris pivots to the political center in her campaign for president, that is, changing all of these stances in her campaign, a 2019 questionnaire from the leading civil rights organization spotlights her past support for left-wing causes such as taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained immigrants and federal prisoners. Now, you might be asking, how do all of these affect small businesses? Well, it's pretty simple. It all boils down to taxes. And who pays the most taxes in America? People who own businesses. In an American Civil Liberties Union questionnaire, then Senator Harris filled out as a candidate for president in 2020, she also expressed support for decriminalizing federal drug possession for personal use, for sweeping reductions to immigration and custom enforcement operations, including drastic cuts in ICE funding and open-ended pledges to end immigration detention. So if you're favoring policies that loosen immigration, it's more likely that people can hire workers at a reduced rate simply because they don't have to pay all of the taxes and the high wages. If you're going to hire illegal immigrants, well, first of all, you're already breaking the law, but second, you don't have to pay all those other taxes. You don't have to pay all the Social Security and Medicare and workers' compensation and all of that. And so employers, devious ones anyway, end up hiring illegal immigrants, cheaper labor, and so they don't have to pay all of the taxes. I mean, it's simple math, my friends. Anytime you increase taxes or regulations on a small business, you end up hurting people that actually are just going out and looking for jobs. All over, and here's the secondary thing, right? If you're supporting policies that are in favor of drug legalization and decreased penalties for crime, all of that impacts the economy. And let me give you an example here. All over social media, you can see pictures of signs that were taken at small businesses, and basically a lot of them say, we're closed today due to a lack of work. Well, you have a whole generation of people that don't really care about work, don't have a lot of drive, and a lot of that was created through the pandemic and having free access to free money, hand over fist. So why would you go out and get a job if you're going to get free money from anybody? Secondly, if you have policies that favor lower penalties for possession and drug use and all of that, well, I mean, that's just more of a reason why folks would stay home and not go to work. And if they do go to work, they're not really all that productive. And so employers end up firing them. So really what I'm getting at here is if Kamala Harris says that she's pro-worker and pro-small business, you really need to take a second look at that, because everything that lady stands for impacts your employer and impacts you if you want to start a small business. It all boils down to that. And when you take into consideration that the business of America, in large parts, really is business. It's businesses that pay most of the taxes. It's businesses that drive the economy. It's businesses that employ people so that you can have this great lifestyle. And so everything that Harris and Biden stand for is absolutely anti-business and anti-worker. Well, my friends, we burned through another busy broadcast hour on the program. Stay tuned to the Independence Network for all of your news and information. You're not going to find a better source than right here. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.